Welcome to Build That Rental, a series of informational events designed to support and educate small developers, builders, and property owners on creating rental properties in our community. First, we want to extend our sincere gratitude to our sponsors whose support made this event series possible: All Care Health, Mid-Rogue Foundation, Common Connections, the Grants Pass and Josephine County Chamber of Commerce, the City of Grants Pass, the Grants Pass City Housing Advisory Council, and the Greater Grants Pass Rotary Club. This initiative comes in response to the housing shortage and rising rental costs in our region by bringing together industry professionals to share their expertise. We hope to provide valuable insights and resources to help navigate the complexities of rental property development, from land use codes and financing to construction and incentives. Tonight we review taking advantage of the new land use code, with middle housing development parameters, and how to use HUD and other programs for maximum value. We look forward to an informative discussion and encourage you to participate. Thank you for being here, and let's get started. First, we join Doug Walker as he highlights the tools and elements used to evaluate where and what to build as you are considering building homes and rentals in the City of Grants Pass, the urban growth boundary in Josephine County. Later, we will have a detailed presentation on the new land use code from Amber Neek, housing specialist for the City of Grants Pass.
We have just underbuilt around here for the last 30 years. And we're in a giant crisis. And so what that means is there's a giant opportunity for people who are willing to go out there and either build rentals or buy them or whatnot. And so that graph basically represents every 10 years how many housing permits were taken out in the state of Oregon in complexes. And so you can see in 2020 through 2021, which is on the right, there was almost zero. 2010, 2019 is the second one on the right, and how few there's been. So there's quite a bit of opportunity for people out there who are interested in building. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we covered on February in our February presentation. We're sort of rehashing that one because it's kind of the meat and potatoes of what's happened over the last 4 years, 3 years or so, with both the state and the city and the various code changes that have occurred. Although Amber is going to come in and talk about some other things on the second half of this. And the state is doing so much that some of what I'm going to talk about has been surpassed, and now it's even easier to build. So it's almost it's happening so fast. I don't want to say it's silly because I think it's very appropriate and needed, but the state is really loosening up codes and making it easier to build. And she will touch on the latest Senate bill that covers a lot of this stuff for those of you that want to build. So I'm going to talk a little bit about parking standards, solar setbacks, and what the city has done around its solar setback standards, its open space standards, ADUs, and the city deserves credit. It was ahead of the game with most of the state with its ADUs 7 years ago, but now everything's surpassed it so much, but they still deserve credit for that. And then what middle housing is done and the middle housing land subdivision. Go ahead, Amber. So to begin with, for those that don't know, there's city boundaries, there's county boundaries, and there's the urban growth boundary. And urban growth boundary is this edge of land around the city boundaries that is what the city will expand into over time. They will take up that land, and it's currently now part of county. So somebody owns that land, they're paying lower county, they're paying lower taxes with the county and everything. But you can, if you're in the urban growth boundary, and there's a few specifics you have to meet, you can build to city standards. And what that means is you can build to a much higher density than you can if you're in county. And that's the real value of being in the urban growth boundary. There are a few yeah buts, and there's a lot of yeah buts in building code, or whatever the right term is to say, if this and if this and if this, then you can do that. But if you're in the urban growth boundary and not in the city, or the property you're thinking about building on is in that zone, explore that, because you can build a much greater density there. Go ahead, next code. So this is an example of both the mapping, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, that one of the resources that the city offers, the GIS mapping system. But these are the various zones within the city. And 9 months ago, 4 years ago, all these zones mattered a lot, and all the R's mean residential, and that kind of mattered. And then there's industrial, the purple swath over here on the right, industrial, general commercial, business park. Those zones, you really can't build a lot of housing in those. I'm not sure you can build any. There's some large apartment buildings you're allowed to. What's that?
General commercial.
Yeah, general commercial, right. But industrial, business park actually has no standards, right?
You can't do housing in business
I
parks.
thought you could. No? Okay. Does that sound right, Dave? Does that sound right? Business park? I'm looking at you, but you're mostly county, right?
I'm where Jackson County.
Yeah, so you don't, okay, all right, never mind then.
Typically, no.
Typically, no, okay, all right. So, but anyway, so this was important 2 or 3 years ago, but now with new standards, it almost doesn't matter. But the R's are residential, and that's where you would be able to build duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, which is kind of what we thought we would talk about in these series of events, was what you might do. But now things are loosening up so much that it almost doesn't matter whether it's R1 or R4 or whatnot. But this is also the city mapping system, and that's kind of, go ahead and go to the next slide. So the city mapping system is a GIS system, and it's really a useful tool and a great resource for those of you who might be exploring the idea of developing something, or maybe you're connected with a realtor and you're thinking about buying a piece of property. And you can really quickly go to the GIS system and the mapping system, and this kind of talks you through that. Go ahead and go back one, the other way. And on the right-hand side, there's the menu there that you click on, and you can click on various different things that will show you what's there and what's allowed or what zone you're in. And I think the most useful thing, although it doesn't show it here, would be the utilities. Is there a water line there? Is there a sewer line there? What do you have to do if you're going to put a duplex there or a fourplex there? And a lot of that cost analysis, that quick back of the napkin cost analysis, you kind of look at these maps and you say, okay, utilities, are the utilities there or are they down the street? If they're down the street, it's like, oh boy, I got to pay for a sewer line up the road to make that happen. So that's one of the really valuable things that the GIS system can do for you. And basically it's a little bit wonky, but it's pretty good. But the eyeballs on the right, where it says mobile vending, flood zones, that eyeball, if you clicked on the eyeball, you would turn it on so you could see what mobile vending food zones are. But where it matters is you would go down to utilities and you click on the utilities and you open up the eyes, and that would show you where all the utilities are. And then you would say, okay, here's the water lines, and it's 2 houses away or it's right in front of me. I could tie into that real well. And that's the value of those GIS systems. They also, if you explore it, they have topography on there, and they have a wide variety of information. It's really quite an in-depth system if you explore it and figure out how to use it. Go ahead and go to the next one. So that was the GIS system. So in the city, the parking standards have been eliminated, which is a nice thing. So you no longer have to have any parking standards. There's a however but to that. You don't have to have parking standards, which means you don't have to provide a parking space. But if you do provide a parking space, it has to meet city standards, right? So that feels kind of contradictory. You don't have to provide parking, but if you do provide a parking space, it has to meet city standards. So where that matters, and for me this matters, and I'm glad it's there. In this example, you have the distance from the sidewalk, which runs sideways, to the parking spot. I think it's 20 feet. And you have to have that 20-foot setback from where the parking spot is in the sidewalk. And for me, that's really appropriate. I used to push my father around in a wheelchair. He was disabled, and we would have to go out into the street and go around a car that was blocking a sidewalk. And it really kind of was a pain in the ass, especially if you didn't have good sidewalks and good ramps down and everything. And so it's really appropriate to have that 20-foot standard. But just remember that if you are going to provide parking, it's going to have to meet city standards. So pay attention to what city standards are. Do a little research in that avenue when you do that. But you don't have to provide parking, which feels kind of contradictory and weird. Go ahead. But when you do develop something, this is a fourplex. This is 2 down, 2 up. This was built 27 years ago in town. It didn't require ADA parking at that time. Now it requires ADA parking. A fourplex falls into now commercial standards, which require 1 unit to be ADA compliant and ADA parking. So if you do a fourplex or greater, you're going to have to do that handicap parking, which is, it's complicated and hard to deal with, but it's there if you get into the fourplexes or fiveplexes or sixplexes. Go ahead. When it comes to ADA requirements, I would recommend, I've had a number of rentals for 27, 28 years was my first one. And then I was working on rentals as a contractor and as a laborer before that. If you're going to build something, make it as handicapped accessible as you possibly can. It's worthwhile. You're going to have tenants who are older. They make better tenants than 20-year-olds. So you're going to want to say, okay, who's going to be the better tenant? 20-year-old, 60-year-old. You're going to go to the 60-year-old. They may be in a walker, maybe for 3 months, or they may be in a walker later on in life. So do what you can to make it as compliant as possible to ADA. And maybe that's you just have easy access to the front door. You don't have steps. You just kind of make it a ramp, or you make sure it's low, or you make sure the hallways are 3 foot or a little greater. You make the doorways 3 foot and put blocking in the walls as much as you possibly can. Put blocking, bathroom walls, excuse me. Put blocking in the bathroom walls, because you're going to want to put bars on those walls. And if nothing else, the towel bars are going to get ripped off the walls in a rental. So put blocking in there and put the towel bars, screw the towel bars into blocking or studs, because they're going to get leaned on. And after 10 years, they're going to come down and get wrecked. So think about that. It may feel like, oh, I'm doing this extra work and I don't want to pay that expense. But in the long run, it's cheaper and easier and better. And it'll work out better for you if you make it as universally, what's it called? Universal standards, right? Is that what's
Universal
called?
design standards.
Universal design standards, thank you. And that's bringing it as close to ADA as you can. ADA standards can be rather cumbersome and difficult to meet those absolute standards of ADA compliance. But if you can bring it close with wider doors, if somebody's got a walker and they've got a 30-inch door, they're going to chew up the door jambs. Just happens. But if you have a 36-inch door, they got more room to move their walker around. They're not going to chew up the door jambs. And you go in there and fix those door jams, there's a $300 or $400 to take the door apart and fix those jams. So it's better to make them as accessible as possible. Go to the next one. The city also changed its methodology for determining solar setback standards. And so this one is kind of wonky, but it's easier to read code now for the average person to go in and say, this is what solar setback standards are, and this is how I can comply with it. And so solar setbacks are, in the basics, are how high your building is and how much shade it casts on the house that's to the north of you. So the sun is normally on the south, creating a shadow to what's on the north of you. And so the city revised those standards 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. And so it's much easier to determine on your own what that height is. So you can do a little back of the napkin and say, yeah, I can put a second story on my garage if I want to put an ADU back there, or I can build a 2-story house back here and have it with a 12-foot setback or something like that. And so that's a really nice thing the city did in the recent past, was to they basically just redid the code so it's easier to understand and easier to calculate on your own. And this is just sort of a reminder slide. It doesn't actually touch on any of the code, but it's there and it's easier to understand. Go ahead. This is talks about open space guidelines and standards. So there's been so many changes. I'm not familiar with the newest change from the state. When was Senate Bill 1537 adopted?
May of last year.
May of last year. So I'm not real familiar with it and its standards, but the city adopted new standards for open space. In the past, there were open space standards, meaning if you were going to build multifamily units on a property, you had to have a bunch of open space. Basically, backyard, side yard, play area for people, for kids. Nowadays, the city has shrunk that quite a bit, and they incorporate a number of the different already existing setbacks and standards into that calculation. So the standards are much smaller, and it's much easier to build. It's under 10 units or less, don't need it. The second bullet, any lot zone within quarter mile of a park or public space doesn't need it. Any lot zone that multifamily dwellings of 5 or more units, there's 1/2 acre or less, doesn't need it. So the city has really allowed that to be a lot easier to build on and not have to have open space. Go ahead. The city's ADU standards, again, the city was ahead of the curve in ADUs 7 years ago. Now the state sort of mandates everything, and it's not quite as much to brag about. But you can put two ADUs. An ADU is something less than 1,000 square feet. You can put two ADUs on a property that already has an existing residence. And the configuration of the ADUs are up to you, the developer. What that means is it can be attached to the existing house. Both units can be detached. One can be attached, one can be detached, one can be above garage. They can be both attached to each other. There used to be restrictions on how those configurations happened. Now there are no standards. You can kind of do whatever you want, which is good. The ADU thing is within the city is less than 1,000 square feet and max 2 units to an already existing dwelling. The city also is encouraging ADUs, and they do it through SDC waivers of parks, the parks fee. So when you build something, there's something called a systems development charge. And those are basically a fee to pay for upgrades to the water system, sewer system, parks, sidewalks, those things. And so the city waives SDCs for parks. And what else?
Transportation.
There's 2 things they waive it on.
Is it transportation?
Transportation, that might be it. So the city says ADUs are worthwhile, so they've eliminated the fees on parks and maybe transportation. So it's a little bit of a savings on an ADU. So they're very much worth exploring if you have a house already, or if you're considering, I want to get into the rentals, maybe I'll buy this small house in the Southwest, and it has an alley access. Well, I can buy this house and I can build 2 little ADUs back here back on this alley access, and it's very worthwhile to do that. Go ahead. So one of the most significant changes from the state from a couple years ago was the middle housing changes. And what it's done, although again, the state is going to continue to lap itself here or leapfrog itself. It said that a duplex, triplex, and fourplex can be built in any residential zone. Any residential zone can now, a duplex, triplex, and fourplex can be built in. And the processes and all of the standards for that single family development apply to that, a duplex, triplex, fourplex. In the past, there were different standards for each one of those to make it harder. Now they're all the same. And that means the setbacks are the same, utilities and road improvements are the same. The permitting process is the same, which is nice, because the permitting process in the past for a triplex or a fourplex was very cumbersome and long. Now they're the same, and that's a really big improvement. Go ahead, next one. That's just an example. Middle housing is kind of a wonky name, but it basically means a duplex, triplex, fourplex is what middle housing is, although I think the state's definition is probably broader than that.
Cottage clusters, townhomes.
Cottage clusters, townhomes, all of those different things. Okay, go ahead, next one. So cottage cluster was something that was really cutting edge 6 years ago, and it's in this slide deck. We probably should drop it, but it basically allows you to build a fairly high density of houses on one lot, and as long as they meet or face the courtyard, or most of them face the courtyard, or open green space in the middle, excuse me, you could do that, and the parking had to be off the side. You can get some very dense developments there. There's a couple cottage clusters that were built a few years ago on, I don't remember the
Fruitdale.
Fruitdale, is that where it was? Yeah, Fruitdale. That were excellent examples of what you can do. But there's a lot of leeway now in what you can build and how dense you can get on your property. So if you have a property, you're thinking about buying stuff, there's a lot more flexibility in it now. Manufactured homes. I don't know if you want to touch on this, because I know you're much more versed on this. You want me to do it? I'll go.
Just the big one that you can use them as ADUs now.
Yeah, so manufactured homes can be used as ADUs, which is great. And if you had a piece of property and you wanted to put some manufactured homes on it, which is a fast way of getting housing up and ready. Manufactured homes now meet nearly all building standards that a regular house does. So they're really well made now. They're not as cheap as they were 30 years ago. They're worthwhile. And you can put 4 to 6 of them on a piece of property, and you don't have to create a park out of it and do all of those HOAs and all of those park standards. So you can treat them like a home. And there are some different manufacturers in the state that are doing pre-built products that are really high quality and worth exploring. Fraser, I think, up north, right by Salem, and then there's a place down in Klamath Falls doing it. So if you are thinking about building something, it's worth exploring what they can do, what the costs are, and how quickly they can turn around a product for you. It can save. I haven't explored prices, so I don't know whether it's a genuine savings versus custom built by somebody, but it's worth exploring. Go ahead. Middle housing land subdivision is probably the most exciting part of what's come out of the state in the last couple of years, is what you can do to subdivide your land. Go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, so this is an example of middle housing land subdivision. So the outer boundaries of this square was what was considered a parent parcel, the original parcel. And that boundary stays, and then say you own that, and it's 100 by 50. And you now can chop up that parent parcel into child parcels. And you can make 0 lot lines in the middle. The lot lines around the edges still stay the same, and you have to meet the same standards on the outer edges, but those inner lot lines can be a lot smaller. And in this example, it's basically a fourplex, and each one of those unit 4, 3, 2, 1 will be sold off in this example as individual units, and then parking is somewhere else, either on the street or if a person would create parking off in the corner. That sort of scenario is now allowed in middle housing land subdivision. It is really raining. That is great. So anyway, that's the end of my little bit, and that's leftovers from the February 22nd event. Our next event is the 7th, and Amber's going to talk a bit about, resources that the city has and some incentives they have, and then also some of the new stuff that the latest changes from the state have come in on. You want to go now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Do you have the presentation on?
Yeah, I
here?
got to pull it up. Give me a moment.
Okay.
I'm going to pull her slides up, so give me a moment.
While he's pulling slides up, I'm just going to bring up a few added pieces. Making sure I'm in the camera. Last time I was hiding in the corner. So back to the manufactured homes. I just want to highlight that the city used to require basically that you had at least a double wide, but with that size reduction, you can do single wides now. So that's another big thing. But one thing they're going to ask you to do for manufactured homes is put them on a foundation. So be aware of that. Oh, and
You go to the next one.
is that?
That's you. Is that you?
That's me.
That's you. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to jump into our housing resources first. So a lot of these I might breeze through a little bit because most of the financial incentives that the city offers are for affordable housing. So the affordable housing is defined as for rentals, it serves households that make at or below 60% of the area moderate income. And then for home ownership, it's for households that make at or below 120% of the area moderate income. And those are both pretty difficult to achieve. So often we see affordable housing complexes, both for home ownership and for rentals, being built by companies that's what they do. Because it takes a whole team of compliance and developers and grant writers, because the funding is so layered. No one source of funding is going to get you through that. So typically you need these massive developer teams to be able to even get that project over, even for the home ownership pieces. So kudos to anyone who wants to take that on, but be ready because it's a big, long process and you're going to need a team. So just again, affordable housing, it's a lasagna of funding. It's federal funds, state funds, local funds, programs, rental assistance programs to meet on the other end, helping your tenants to make it. So we can roll on past that. So what incentives are typically offered for development, specifically again for affordable housing, but any housing really? The most impactful is going to be land. The city has some control over land sometimes, but only land that they own. So it's pretty rare for a city to be able to say, here's a lot of land. And if they do, usually they're saying we're selling it, not that we're giving it to you. Maybe if there's a discount. Sometimes we see this at market rate, even in our urban area or urban renewal area, but typically if it's not in the urban renewal area, that's going to be for affordable housing if they're going to do some sort of caveat to a sale as opposed to just a straight sale. There's other allocatable funding, which I'll get into what the city has available, removing regulatory barriers, which is a lot of what we're talking about today, our code tools that kind of help make development a little bit easier, helping with partners, all the kinds of stuff that can happen. So again, that lasagna, the city gap, our local funding gap is so small in that big picture of what gets projects over that finish line. This is an example from an affordable housing complex, but even for market rate, when we look at incentives, where the city or where your local funding is going to come in, it's typically going to be what's called gap funding. And it is, you're going to need to tell us why without this funding, this project isn't going to make it over the edge. And typically that's going to be a small amount. It's not going to be this massive, like 50% of your project costs. So what the city has available again, most of these are going to be exclusively for affordable housing, except for one, maybe two of those. Our affordable housing grant is a system development charge waiver. This is for affordable rental housing only. This eliminates your system development charges, which for large apartment complexes, that could be $300,000-$400,000. So that's a pretty impactful piece, but most of those complexes, their total cost for development is going to be like $25 million. So in comparison, it's a small drop, but it's so necessary. Often these complexes, in order to get their main funding through the state or through any other program that they're doing, they need to show that the city has buy-in to earn points on their application process, because these are highly competitive funds they're applying for. So anything that we can do as a city to say, yeah, we've bought in, we're going to try and support it. We don't have a lot, but here's what we did. Sometimes these projects, it's more about getting those points than it is even getting that funding. Our affordable housing CET fund, that does have a little bit more opportunity for market rate, a lot more opportunity for home ownership. Getting it closer to the affordable side is going to be pretty key for that one. That one comes available every 2 to 3 years. The city has to let it build up because it is funded by the construction excise tax. But that does get put back into development of both affordable rental and affordable home ownership projects, and it does go to down payment assistance programs that are put on through the state, but they make sure that the funds that we send to the state for the down payment assistance program was only spent here in Grants Pass. So they do make sure that comes back to us. Community Development Block Grant, that has some pretty wider implications. They've done things such as helping projects with infrastructure. We do our housing weatherization and rehabilitation program. That's for existing homeowners to utilize, but that one has a bit broader opportunities. So if you think you have a project, the closer you can get it to affordability is great, but you can also potentially utilize it if you're building in a census area that is identified as low income. So keep that in mind. Urban Renewal Agency, this one has the most possibility of being able to be utilized at market rate. The urban renewal area, it's a tax incentive. So the whole purpose is for that at the end of the period of the urban renewal, the economy in that area has been invested in and built up, and ultimately the city gets more taxes back out of it in the end. So they're much more open to market rate housing because those are going to be paying more taxes than low income housing. It is what it is. So that funding, and the city has quite a bit of funding set aside for housing in that area. The thing to know about our urban renewal area, though, is that it is primarily in general commercial. So you're going to be looking at potentially doing apartments. There is some residential, so it's not completely apartments, but by and large, if you're seeing property and it's in urban renewal, it's likely going to be needing to be an apartment just because of the zoning that it's in. One-time grants, we don't currently have any open left. Our most recent ones were the ARPA funds and the DAS funds. As the city is able to acquire grants, we can put those out to the public to utilize. Sometimes there are grants through Business Oregon, sometimes there's grants through Energy Trust of Oregon. We do our best to find grants, maybe be able to get them and put on a program ourselves, but they are highly competitive usually. And then city surplus property. This is a finite resource. So typically the city has property they've bought for parks, they've bought for potential city hall expansion, other sort of, thoughts of things the city might need. And if they have property that they say, okay, we've decided we no longer need that, or this is more important, they might sell off a property, and that's where that can come in. Oftentimes these properties are kind of smaller, awkward, single-family home lots. Those may just go out onto the market. Oftentimes they do. But if there's larger lots, the city can and has in the past put out a request for proposals or a request for interest for development. And that's where the city can have a little bit more control and say, we have this lot, we know we want to sell it, but we have an idea of what we'd like to be built there. All right. Oh,
The urban renewal or the URA again?
yeah.
I want to touch on the urban renewal area. So that's the most likely, like Amber mentioned, the most likely fund that the average person can access. And so it's a geographic boundary. You have wherever your property is actually within that boundary. And it's basically up and down 67, about 2 blocks to either side, and then down N Street all the way out to Spalding, right? Is that all right?
You're going to love this. I have maps.
Yeah.
I've got maps. I got so excited about this slide. I just talked about my next 5 slides instead of showing you them. So we'll kind of breeze through them. But I do have maps for the urban renewal area. If you want to hit next. So that's the affordable housing grant. We talked about that. That was the SDC waivers. 60% area median income. Yeah, we can move past that one. Just go till you see the maps. I already talked about it. I was so excited. I just kept going. So this is the zoom out of the urban renewal area. 6th and 7th Street, Redwood area, out by kind of Walmart. Very economic development. So it's going to be a lot of general commercial. Like I said, there's some yellow in there. That's your residential. Seek and destroy, right? There's a few zoom in maps if you want to keep clicking through just to get a little bit closer on some of those neighborhoods. Ultimately, that mapping GIS software that Doug was talking about earlier has this on there. And you can go into it such detail, you can find specific addresses, pull it up, it'll highlight those areas so you can see which lots are in the urban renewal area. So I recommend, again, find that GIS software. It's on the front homepage of the city website. Play around with it. It's got some really great tools. So we talked a little bit about middle housing code. We're going to talk about a little bit deeper middle housing land division. Something called House Bill 2138 has expanded upon that just a little bit. They've added some definitions that I want to make sure we go into. But the star of the show tonight is going to be the Oregon Senate Bill 1537, which is mandatory adjustments. This is kind of, it's not a get out of jail free card, but it is a pass to bypass a lot of the development code in the name of affordability, but not program restricted affordability. Just making these units more affordable to the market, getting them on there so people can afford to buy them as well, so you can afford to bring them to the people, making them easier to develop. So it's going to be a big help. We can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So this is just a nice example I like to bring up. A lot of people get scared with new housing types. I know middle housing isn't entirely new. It's been around for a couple of years now, but it's good to highlight. And especially we met at the city with some financiers a couple weeks ago to say, hey, what are your reservations on middle housing? How do you fund them? And my big takeaway from that, is that the more you can develop your middle housing to feel and look like single family would, but smaller, the more those banks are going to be a lot more comfortable loaning to you like a single family home if your intention is to sell it as a single family home. But the less it looks like that, the more you have your parking off to one side or don't provide parking and someone has to street park, the more it feels like an apartment complex, but it's called middle housing. Those are going to be the ones that are going to say, hey, I know your intentions are to split them off and sell them, but I'm still going to loan to you as if it's commercial. And those loans don't have as good rates. They don't give you as much, and you have to bring a lot more up front. So if your design is, any of these are pretty good, but the closer you get to that look of that single family home, because you can take that garage with ADU or the detached ADU in that blue middle one, you can put a lot line in that, and you could sell that ADU as its own home. So if you have that ADU and it's on an alley and it's got its own parking lot, its own access, and I can put a fence right down the middle and I never have to walk by that other house that was the original house to that lot, and it just feels like a small house that happens to access off an alley, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable loaning on that as a residential to sell, as opposed to a commercial for rent. So that was my big takeaway, is make it feel like a home if you're going to try and sell it like a home. But they also, you can make them fit the neighborhood character pretty easily. Middle housing code, we did talk about, it allows up to a quadplex on any lot zoned for residential. I've got some definitions on what counts as middle housing. And if we go into the next slide. So that bill, 2138, one of my big takeaways from that is that recall back to that universal design standard, because that's going to come in handy here. If you are wanting to add up to 6 units now, instead of just 4, which is the normal, if you want to add 2 more units, you can, if those resulting 2 units are either affordable or accessible, fully accessible. So that's a lot more of an incentive to make sure that that last extra unit or extra 2 units, you can get a wheelchair to every room in that house. And the reason we're pushing that so hard, the accessibility, is we have an aging population. We have so many people, and statistically, most of us are going to become disabled at some point in our lives, likely after we retire. And with an aging population, we're becoming more and more primarily a retiree community, especially in Grants Pass. There's a lot of retirees in Grants Pass. We need to make sure our housing can accommodate them. And like Doug was saying, if you have a tenant who becomes wheelchair bound, it is so much more expensive to go in and widen all those doorways and pull out the shower so you can put studs in the back so you can actually have some handlebars that will support someone's weight, as opposed to if you go, I don't know if I'll have someone in a wheelchair, but someone who's not in a wheelchair isn't really going to notice that the doorways are a little bit wider and that there's a stud behind the shower. It's so much cheaper to put it in beforehand. You're agreeing back there.
I agree. I've been watching this. I think at the state level for accessible accessory dwelling, you can say around 1,200 square feet to allow for the wider halls and more accessibility. I don't know if you have that in your code yet.
I will make sure we do. I will make sure we do. It's an excellent idea.
More incentive to have a slightly larger unit. So
Yes. So with this provision, it takes what was already pretty mind-blowing. You can take any lot that used to be single family only and go up to 4 units. That's great. Now you can go up to 6 if you're going to add that extra piece, accessibility or affordability. So keep that in mind. And then we can go on. Middle housing land division, again, really want to highlight this because you can build an ADU, and as long as it's not a top and bottom, like 2 units stacked, you can separate that off. It can be attached, and you can separate that off and sell it. It's going to be harder to sell the less it looks and feel like a single family home in our area, because it's a new concept and there's public, what does the public want in this area? So as it becomes less and less new, as more people become more accustomed to it, maybe 10, 20 years down the road, it won't be as hard to sell necessarily. People have gotten used to the idea and they go, yeah, this is how I get my first house. I buy any ADU. But right now it's harder to loan on, harder to get buyers, unless it looks just like a small house. So keep that in mind with your designs. But yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here wondering, like, when are people going to catch on that you can buy homes with detached ADUs and just draw a lot line and sell half of it? Business idea. So a little bit of information, we are building middle housing. We have been building middle housing. These are all the permits that were put out for different middle housing types last year. Odd one out, cottage cluster. 2, you think, well, 2 is not a cottage cluster. Well, someone had a home and they added units to it and made that whole property a cottage cluster. The 2 are the new units that were resulted in that. So they converted a single family home into a cottage cluster. And you can do that. You can take existing property that is one type and turn it into a duplex by adding a second home. It doesn't have to be attached. We think of duplex as attached. It does not have to be. A fourplex does not have to be attached. It's just what the building department's going to call it. So then we're getting into mandatory housing adjustments. This is a really cool piece of code. It gives developers the opportunity to get an adjustment to the development code, which historically you would go through the variance process. You have to pay money, you have to wait longer, you have to go through in front of council to get an approval, you have to argue why it's necessary. This is a kind of fast track to that. You can get up to 10 variances or mandatory adjustments to the development code. There are some specifics that they cover. You can't, it's not a free-for-all. You can't make any changes to fire safety code. You can't make any changes to accessibility, affordability, local tree codes, natural resources, but there's still a lot that you can do. So I'll have you go on to the next slide there. So how do you qualify for it? My first thought when I saw this is, yeah, you're gonna have to be affordable housing. It's not a bad thing, but that's not the case. All you have to do is it has to be on land that is already zoned for residential. You do have to meet a density. It has to be, you have to meet 10 dwelling units per acre, which if you think about it, I mean, you could reach that with a triplex. You may even be able to reach that with a duplex on a smaller lot. You don't need 10 units. It just needs to come out to 10 units per acre in the math. So yeah, they're gonna want middle housing. They're gonna want a little bit higher density. That's why they're giving you these incentives. It needs to be within the urban growth boundary. And on the next slide, it has to make new housing units. And it does include single family. So you want to do a subdivision, make it work. And it needs to meet one of the following criteria. They make it super easy, okay? Reduces the sale or rental price of the unit. This is not program restricted. You just need to say, because I didn't have to put as many windows on this wall, it can be cheaper now for me to rent it or to sell it. That's not hard to do. It will increase the amount of units in the application. I'm doing a duplex now instead of a single family home. We've done it. Now I get 10 exemptions. It is not hard to meet these qualifications. You just need to write down on a piece of paper which one you chose that it's going to make. Go ahead and move on to the next one. So this is going to dive in. This is actually the list of what can you do. And as we do this, feel free to start asking questions, because I think this is where we're going to get a lot of back and forth. You can request adjustments on setbacks. You can request adjustments on common area, open space. So we've already lowered our open space. You can lower it more. You can bring it even down, or even further down. We don't have parking minimums anymore, so we don't have to worry about that, but we do have minimum lot sizes. You can request a variance on that. Maximum lot sizes. I need to be able to do something on a bigger lot so that I can put more units on it. building lot coverage, building height maximums. You want to go taller than the code already requires. Right now, our general commercial only lets you go up to 35 feet in most areas. You're going to need a little bit more than that to get another floor in there. So that can be pretty helpful. Unit density maximums. If this one is if one of your other or any of your other adjustments means you're going to go above the density maximum, then you can use that. You can't just pick that and say, I just want to add more for the fun of it. We'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. Mixed use development, facade materials, color, pattern, articulation, roof forms, all of this stuff that's making it pretty, you know. We want to look a certain way, so we want all these different, like your building can't just be a flat wall. You've got so many feet before you have to put a cool indent or different roof articulation, total window area, all of that stuff in a housing crisis, not necessarily the priority, doesn't make or break the livability of a home. Let's give people some adjustments to this. Now, I know this is a lot, and I see some of you already picked them up, but there are some handy dandy handouts in the back. One of them even has QR codes to go onto DLCD's website to get even more information about it. And they have a pretty good Q&A with developers who are very familiar with codes, and they're like, okay, you said I can get 50% of a height, but how does that work when I've already got a height bonus in the code? They go into all those nitty gritty details to help you figure out what exactly can you do. But the other thing you can do is just call the development department. We're familiar with our code, it's our jobs. And we want to help. We want to help you guys get these projects over the line. We want to make sure that you guys get the best deal possible and that we get great housing. So we're here to help. And I think we're going on to resources at this point. Is that right? Yeah. It went really fast. So I do want to make sure Q&A, I feel like I breezed through a lot of things. Ask me questions. Yeah.
Well, first thing that they talk about the business park uses, I looked it up and it's really limited. It's kind of like maybe a house for the business owner, and especially for existing dwellings like that. Not a real, I think residential homes that for people over there, very limited.
For which one?
For BP.
Business. Oh yeah, you're right.
And then the other thing, the mandatory adjustments, does that expire? I thought there was an expiration on this, and we don't put it in code, it just stays active.
We don't put it in code, so you might be right that it expires. With an expiration date, basically, they're saying we're in a housing crisis. What we need more than all the windows is all the units. So
But just the warning, maybe you need to act on this earlier rather than later.
get her done, yeah. Yes.
Does the city have some permitting benefit for ADUs? Like,
Does the city have permitting benefits for ADUs? Yes. So first of all, the city provides some pre-made ADU plans. These are pre-developed, pre-approved. So if you utilize the plans, and those are on the city website, which you'll go to the city website, and I think we'll have them in the handout as well. They have plans for studio ADUs, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. I don't believe we have 3 bedroom, but we might. Don't quote me on that. Multiple plans. If you take that plan and you go, okay, I can put this rectangle in my yard, it's gonna fit, it's gonna meet all the setbacks, you're already approved. And you didn't have to pay a design professional to go and figure it out because it's already been designed. So that's a savings in itself, and it saves you time because it's been approved by the planning department already. On top of that, we do have those SDC waivers on some of the SDCs. Typically, those turn out to be around $4,000 off of your SDCs. So it's definitely not nothing. It's a help. So these slides will be available on the website at resources.buildthatrental.com. And also, Kat is great and puts all the interesting links up there as well. So it's not just these slides, but all sorts of wealth of information and interesting links that can help you even further to get closer to your goal.
Two. The information for the next event is HUD, how to use HUD and whatnot, and also the other tenant assistance programs that UCAN has, DHS has, and various other ones, and how to use those assistance programs for your tenants if you have tenants that are struggling. That's our next program. And it's October 7th. Thank you.